In terms of our short-term support to Ukraine, we unanimously agreed that now is not the time for lifting sanctions in any way. If there cannot be lifting of sanctions before peace has been established. We aim to maintain economic pressure on the shadow fleet and on some industrial capabilities, and we will stay mobilized on this issue. We also talked about the preparation and monitoring of the ceasefire. That was the second key thing after our short-term support for the Ukrainian armed forces. As you know, and this is at the very heart of the Ukrainian and American proposal, a ceasefire on the air, sea, and civilian infrastructure. We need to ensure we agree the means to monitor the ceasefire. There's a lot of different discussions about how the situation be monitored once the peace agreement has been agreed. Should responsibility be given to the OSCE, as was the case between 2014 and 2022? Should the UN be given a mandate to monitor peace on the front line between Ukraine and the occupied territories? Should there be an ad hoc monitoring system? There are a number of very important legal and technical questions there, and we therefore asked our foreign ministers to come up with a very concrete monitoring proposal in order to monitor a short-term and sustainable ceasefire in order to form the basis of discussions with our US partners. The next question discussed was that of security guarantees. Once a peace agreement has been signed, how can we ensure that Ukraine remains free, stable, and free of further Russian aggression? In this regard, we shared the view that there is a lack of clarity about the conditions for signing a peace agreement and a lack of clarity on the nature of American day-after commitments. We nonetheless agreed on 3 areas of work: maintaining sustainable and robust, to maintain a stable and robust peace after the peace agreement has been signed. The first aspect for Ukrainian and European security is a strong, well-equipped Ukrainian army. All meeting participants today agreed on this point. That's why, in very concrete terms, we agreed that the British Prime Minister and myself will task our chiefs of defence to ensure that a Franco-British team should be sent to Ukraine in the next few days to work very closely with our Ukrainian partners. They also agreed to this mechanism in order to prepare the format of the Ukrainian armed forces in the futures, the army, the navy, and the air forces. What format is required in terms of the number of soldiers, and what equipment and hardware is required in order to respond to future Russian aggression and deter any Russian aggression. This will enable us to move forward to a planning phase in order to clarify the contribution of each country that's a member of our coalition, in order to give Ukraine a clear idea of the very precise action plan we want to put in place. The second security guarantee will be the reassurance forces that will be deployed the day after the peace agreements. These reassurance forces were what was proposed by the French and the British, not to keep the peace. I'm responding to what a colleague has said. It's not about monitoring the forces on the contact line. It's not a force that will replace or substitute for the Ukrainian army. It's going to be a force of some of the members present. Not all members have agreed to this. Not all members are capable of doing this. Not all members have the political position to do this, but it will be a force that will be placed in strategic areas agreed with the Ukrainians in order to provide sustainable support in the longer term, reassurance and deterrence against any potential Russian aggression. We will work on this with our chiefs of defence as part of the mandate I've just referred to. We will map out the key points and we will come to an agreement as to the format of these reassurance forces. It has been very clearly agreed that these reassurance forces will, under no circumstances, replace the effort we're making on NATO's east flank. They will be an additional force in a similar mode to what we do in those eastern NATO countries. The third area of security guarantees will focus on our own defence. And I think there was a unanimous agreement around the table to say that Europeans are much more united than a few weeks ago, more bold, more determined, and we want to ensure that whatever happens in Ukraine over the next few weeks, it is key to ensure the security of Europeans over the next few years. So we agreed to reinforce our security architecture to protect the continent, firstly by agreeing all that has been done by the European Union and its member states. We will increase our military investments and capabilities in order to provide deterrence and to prepare sustainable peace for the continent. We will increase coordination between our defence industries and armed forces in order to work together. We also agreed to work together to define the demands that we will make of Russia, again, in order to enhance our security, collective security. This situation has been deteriorated by the Russian and US decisions to come out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty and also by the stationing of Russian forces in Belarus. Here are the key conclusions of the summits that has just been held. We have achieved a tasking that our colleagues have given us. We were asked by Prime Minister Starmer to work together to provide joint leadership to this coalition and to coordinate initiatives in order to maintain momentum. So alongside Prime Minister Starmer, we will take this responsibility of leading this coalition of action for robust and sustainable peace. So from next week onwards, our diplomatic advisors will take a number of initiatives and will follow up on the decisions that have been made today alongside the chiefs of defence who will continue following up on the tasking that we've given them. I'm now going to take questions. Thank you, President. Francesco Fontamaggi, Agence France Presse. You talked about these reassurance forces. You talked about it in conditional tense. Could you tell us exactly what has been agreed today? Has the principle of sending European reassurance forces or NATO reassurance forces or Friends of Ukraine forces, has this been agreed? The day after a peace agreement, will there be a reassurance force for Ukraine, and will France be part of this, and in what way? Will there be boots on the ground, a ground aspect, or will it simply be an airborne force? Will it depend on Russia's response? Thank you very much for that question. Today, the reassurance forces are a Franco-British proposal. It's been agreed by France and the UK. It's been requested by Ukraine, and other countries have signalled their willingness to join. It's not a unanimous decision, and everyone knows that, but we don't need unanimity in order to put it in place. So how are we going to prepare things? We're going to do this through the tasking for our chiefs of defence of the UK and French armed forces. They're going to work together to build a team alongside Ukrainian colleagues. The Ukrainians will tell us exactly what their needs are. We held these discussions yesterday with President Zelensky. They've got a very clear idea of the key areas, the critical zones where the reassurance forces should be deployed. So we'll have discussions between our military leaders to determine the locations, the number of forces to be deployed for it to be credible, and the capabilities. Nothing has been rolled up, actually. We'll look at sea forces, ground forces, and air forces. This reassurance force, as you rightly said, should not substitute the peacekeeping forces on the contact line or the strong and robust Ukrainian army. And the reassurance force will be part of a package to be discussed. So the Ukrainian armed forces and the reassurance forces are both things that the Russians are opposing. The Russians have said they don't want a Ukrainian army. Russia hasn't agreed to this. We know this. But because we work under international humanitarian law, so it's not up to Russia what happens on Ukrainian soil. So it has been agreed, and we will move forward and work on it. So there will be a reassurance force bringing together several European forces, and it will be deployed. Good afternoon, President. I'm a journalist for Phoenix TV in China. Would you like China to play a more active role in future peace negotiations and ceasefire negotiations? And would you like China to play a role in post-war reconstruction? The French foreign minister is just starting a visit to China. Will the question of Ukraine be a key question during this visit? What are you expecting from this visit? Yes, indeed. I asked my foreign minister to visit China in order to hold discussions about a number of bilateral dossiers and the major international questions. Ukraine is, of course, a priority in terms of international affairs. For my part, I do hope that China can play an active role, given the quality of its dialogue with Russia, given that it took an initiative in favor of peace alongside Brazil a few months ago. I would like the Chinese president to play an active role in helping us to build this robust and sustainable peace. I think that China has a legitimate role to play as a permanent member of the Security Council, and given the initiatives it has already taken. Good afternoon, President. TF1 LCI. My question is about the 2 billion euros in additional aid for Ukraine that you announced yesterday. Is it realistic to think that that could happen without tax rises for French people, given that our debt in France is over 3 trillion euros? What should the French people expect? Will we have to make cuts to public services or public spending? Will that be a red line for you? And will your thinking move forward in terms of the frozen Russian assets and how these can be used? Thank you very much. With regard to your first question, first of all, a number of these transfers come into under the scope of our Military Programming Act, which has moved forward. This is part of our financial architecture and part of the path we've already drawn up, and it includes renewal of a number of our capabilities. These two military programming acts will double our budget for our armed forces. We anticipated things. We didn't wait for the last 2 weeks or the last few years to make these investments. We are transferring equipment and hardware that we've been using up until recently because we're renewing them. That's part of the 2 billion aid package.